I wasn't sure how I was going to approach this subject. On the one hand, I know for a fact that it's doable, as I'm an actual living example at this very moment. But on the other hand, I realize that nobody's ever derived a workable theory or philosophy out of a sample size of one. And even if you could, I'm also self-aware enough to see that I'm far from the greatest benchmark in the world for normal. With all that said, however, I do think I can offer a cogent set of guidelines to follow when constructing your own life path, if not a hard and fast roadmap to the forever elusive dream life. And given my atypical relation to the subject, I suppose I should begin by establishing some of my own personal lore so you understand how I got from point A to Z. However, as I understand you didn't come here to have some internet rando trauma dump on you for 5 minutes, I'll keep this part mercifully brief. Okay, so TLDR. Way back in 2015, I was diagnosed with a particularly severe case of Crohn's disease, which, for those who don't know, is an autoimmune disorder that essentially causes your immune system to try to eat your colon. The consequences of this are every bit as pleasant as you can no doubt surmise. I'll spare you the brunt of the details, but to give you some idea of just how precarious my particular case was. At 6'3", I weighed less than 130 pounds before I got on medication. It was bad enough that the doctor took one look at me and immediately pushed his entire schedule for that week up a day so he could get me into treatment as soon as possible. And while I have more or less stabilized as of the time of writing, repeated experience has taught me to regard this as a temporary reprieve rather than a developmental milestone, more like a Dark Souls bonfire than a save point. Needless to say, this unhelpful development and its lifelong ramifications left my 20-year-old self somewhat up a creek without a paddle, lacking the means, both physical and financial, to forge a meaningful life for myself in the normal ways. As far as I could see, my options were either A, simply throw in the towel while I still had nothing to lose, B, sit around for the next 40 years feeling sorry for myself, C, squander my precious youth hoping for a miracle or trying to fix what couldn't be fixed, or D, simply say to hell with it and put what little time and energy I had at my disposal to work while I still had it. And in case you've somehow not picked up what I've just put down yet, I chose the latter. Deciding that if I was going to be the cosmos's bitch no matter what, I at least wasn't going to go out having been a complete waste of my parents' time and resources. Fortunately for me, I'd never really had any strong inclinations towards breeding in the first place, so all my condition really did, aside from chaining me to the bed of the American medical system, was give me an excuse to do what I was probably going to end up doing eventually anyway. Fast forward about a decade, and I have circa 90% of a fantasy series done and published, several eclectic works on philosophy and fantasy nerd tech. As asides, I've invented a whole new subgenre of fantasy, and I have a slowly flowering YouTube channel through which to show off these fruits of my laborious studies. Now, my reason for front-loading this subject this way is not to try to farm sympathy or to claim some sort of victim points. My aim is firstly to illustrate that I have no dog in this fight. Meaning, when I talk about things like the state of the modern mating and dating markets on this channel, I do so from the perspective of an academic outsider. I have neither the ability nor the desire to play those games, and I never will. Even if I could snap my fingers and take us back to the 1950s right this instant, my personal standing within that market wouldn't change. In fact, if anything, it'd probably get worse. But my ultimate point here is to demonstrate that there are other ways of leaving a legacy without needing to give over your means of procreation to someone who'll never be as invested in their success as you are. And whether you'd personally consider mine a success or not is not at issue. The simple fact of the matter is that I could die tomorrow and be totally satisfied that I've played the cards I was dealt to the best of my ability and that I've left behind something of worth, even if only as kindling for someone else's mental hearth. And in that light, I'm hoping that I can, if not teach, at least help inspire some others to seek out similar outlets if, for whatever reason, they find themselves unable to reach their procreative goals via the traditional paths. You'll notice I use the word procreative in place of reproductive for the co-partner to our survival instinct. My reasoning for this is that I believe the creative and reproductive motors, at least in men, share a majority of the same neurological hardware. This is why I think it is that, despite nearly every article and video out there discussing the red pill and MGTOW and incels, proclaim them to be all symptomatic manifestations of a broader male loneliness epidemic, if we look around at what's actually happening in the real world, women actually seem to be bearing the brunt of the psychological damage wrought by the culture and gender wars. The inevitable apocryphal and/or anecdotal unicorns notwithstanding, the preponderance of men derive their sense of meaning and purpose from their material achievements, whereas the majority of women derive theirs from establishing relationships, both platonic and romantic. This is why I say that the male loneliness epidemic is really a male legacy epidemic. And the unsung advantage to this for men is that if true, it means we don't actually need anyone other than ourselves to be happy or content in life. As long as we're doing something we feel leaves a tangible impact on the world that'll outlast us, our neurobiology can't tell the difference. Of course, this leaves the women in a bit of a sore spot as if the men leave. Wherefrom are they meant to derive their sense of meaning and purpose, but from the shallow pit of a corporate career or a legion of cats? But since I am not now, nor have I ever been a woman, and so far as my analytics are anything to go by, neither is circa 98% of my audience. I'm not going to even hazard to put in words on that front. Perhaps the single most controversial take in this channel's history, aside from having the gall to unironically like the midichlorians, was when I said that an artist who can be threatened by generative AI is an automaton, not a creative. Similar to how if a woman can be replaced with a dishwasher and a corn tab, she's not really the wife material she claims to be. Basically, my point is that if you want your legacy to survive the coming century, you need to truly pull out all the stops and become what your ancestors never had to be, a complete and full person. That is, become a rich, complex being capable of original thoughts, as opposed to another simple cog in a machine that takes somebody else's prompts as their imperative gospel. Once you've done that, when you're proficient in the ways of art and science, philosophy and history, literature and tech, then you can go on to plant and grow your own crop of seedlings. You don't need to shun the new tools of the 21st century to do this. In fact, you'll be at a severe handicap if you refuse to employ them out of some egotistical sense of self-righteous purity. You live in the most informational age in the history of mankind. Use these tools to better yourself, and then leave your stamp on the world in what ways only you can. Then at least you can die knowing that you fought the good fight. Although the one piece of tangible advice I'll leave you on is one I got from reading Aaron Clarey's Book of Numbers. Find a passion with a material result, something you can actually physically hold and look at and go, I built this. But that's just my read on the situation. Leave your own thoughts below. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't plug my channel merch and Amazon repertoire after a spiel like that. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow me on alternate channels to give YouTube the bird. And as always, my friends, stay safe, stay sane, and remember, he is freest who accepts that he is already dead and that all is already lost. Peace be upon you.